Internally, within me, I felt like everything was going great. Somehow the songs that I would imagine.
John Fogerty, the swamp rock king who turned Creedence Clearwater Revival into one of America's most beloved bands.
We can put the power down, listen to the radio.
The man who wrote timeless classics while channeling the soul of the bayou from his California garage. But behind those iconic guitar riffs and that distinctive gravelly voice was a musician harboring decades of resentment, bitter feuds, and explosive hatred for some of rock's biggest names.
I see a bunch of people look a lot like me, except they're naked.
Yeah. Fogerty wasn't just CCR's creative genius. He was a perfectionist who demanded authenticity in an industry built on artifice. When fellow musicians fell short of his standards or crossed him personally, the consequences were swift and lasting. His grudges ran deeper than Mississippi mud, and his enemies' list reads like a who's who of rock royalty. Tonight, we're exposing the dark side of John Fogerty's legendary career. From backstage confrontations to legal warfare, these are the 6 musicians who discovered that crossing the master of swamp rock meant facing years of creative vengeance and public humiliation. You think you know the peaceful, nature-loving John Fogerty? Think again. This is the explosive countdown of the 6 musicians John Fogerty hated the most, and the shocking reasons their conflicts nearly destroyed his passion for music forever. 6. Bruce Springsteen. Bruce Springsteen represented everything John Fogerty believed was wrong with manufactured Americana. While Fogerty had lived the blue-collar experience he sang about, he viewed Springsteen as a middle-class pretender who adopted working-class imagery for commercial appeal. Their philosophical clash divided rock critics and exposed Fogerty's deepest insecurities about artistic credibility. The tension began when music journalists started comparing their storytelling approaches in the mid-1970s. Critics praised Springsteen's authentic voice of American struggle, while describing Fogerty's work as nostalgic fantasy. This comparison infuriated Fogerty, who had grown up in genuine hardship while Springsteen came from suburban comfort. According to industry insiders, Fogerty's resentment exploded during a 1975 radio interview where he dismissed Springsteen as a college boy playing dress-up as a factory worker. He accused the boss of stealing real people's stories and turning them into Broadway shows. Studio musicians who worked with both artists describe Fogerty's obsession with proving his superior authenticity through grittier production choices. The conflict intensified when Springsteen's Born to Run achieved critical acclaim that Fogerty felt his own work deserved. Music executives witnessed Fogerty's bitter response to Springsteen's media coverage, calling it manufactured mythology for people who've never seen a real small town. Springsteen's camp responded diplomatically, with associates suggesting Fogerty was threatened by anyone else telling American stories. This only fueled Fogerty's anger, leading him to make increasingly harsh public statements about fake authenticity in rock music. This rivalry pushed Fogerty to emphasize his genuine roots even more strongly, influencing his solo career's focus on personal experience over universal themes. The competition with Springsteen's narrative approach shaped Fogerty's determination to prove that real experience trumped artistic imagination. 5. Neil Young. Neil Young's experimental approach to music clashed violently with John Fogerty's traditionalist philosophy. While Fogerty believed in perfecting classic American sounds, Young's constant genre-hopping and deliberate imperfection represented everything Fogerty despised about self-indulgent artistry. Their conflict became a battle between musical purity and artistic exploration. The initial confrontation occurred during a 1970s benefit concert where both musicians were scheduled to perform. Backstage sources describe a heated exchange where Young criticized CCR's commercial pandering and suggested Fogerty was afraid to take real artistic risks. Fogerty's response was characteristically blunt, calling Young a pretentious noisemaker who mistakes chaos for creativity. Concert promoters witnessed escalating tensions when Young's feedback-heavy performance directly preceded Fogerty's set. Sound engineers describe Fogerty's fury at having to follow Young's experimental cacophony, calling it self-indulgent garbage that disrespects the audience. He accused Young of hiding behind weirdness instead of learning to write real songs. The feud deepened when music critics began praising Young's willingness to evolve and challenge expectations, while describing Fogerty as stuck in the past. Industry veterans recall Fogerty's angry response to these comparisons, where he defended traditional songcraft against what he called artistic masturbation. Young's associates fired back, suggesting Fogerty was creatively limited and jealous of musicians brave enough to experiment. This criticism cut deep, as Fogerty prided himself on his musical craftsmanship and viewed Young's approach as lazy rather than innovative. The rivalry influenced Fogerty's stubborn resistance to changing his sound throughout his career. His determination to prove that classic approaches remained superior drove him to perfect his swamp rock formula, rather than explore new territories, ultimately limiting his artistic growth while strengthening his signature style. 4. The Eagles. The Eagles represented everything John Fogerty despised about the California music scene's commercialization of American roots music. While Fogerty authentically channeled rural traditions, he viewed the Eagles as slick opportunists who sanitized country rock for mass consumption. Their massive success, while CCR struggled with legal battles, intensified his resentment into pure hatred. The conflict began when both acts were competing for radio dominance in the early 1970s. Music industry executives described Fogerty's fury when the Eagles' polished harmonies received more airplay than CCR's grittier approach. He accused them of turning real country music into elevator music for rich people, and dismissed their success as proof that fake sells better than authentic. Recording studio insiders witnessed Fogerty's explosive reaction when told that Eagles albums were outselling CCR releases. He launched into a tirade about pretty boy musicians who've never seen a real farm, and accused them of stealing the sound of real America and making it boring. His criticism was particularly harsh toward their vocal harmonies, which he called overproduced nonsense that removes all the soul. The rivalry escalated when the Eagles' Hotel California dominated the charts while Fogerty was battling legal issues that prevented him from recording. Music journalists documented his bitter comments about their success, where he suggested they were benefiting from real musicians' legal troubles and profiting from diluted versions of authentic sounds. This hatred drove Fogerty to emphasize his authentic roots even more aggressively, leading to increasingly traditional arrangements that sometimes limited his creative expansion. His determination to prove the Eagles' approach was inferior influenced decades of his artistic choices. 3. Robbie Robertson, the band. Robbie Robertson's role in the band triggered John Fogerty's deepest insecurities about musical authenticity and creative credit. While both musicians explored American roots music, their approaches and personalities clashed in ways that exposed Fogerty's fears about recognition and artistic legitimacy. This became a battle over who truly understood and represented American musical heritage. The initial tension arose from critics constantly comparing CCR and the band as premier interpreters of American music. Music journalists praised the band's sophisticated approach to roots music, while sometimes dismissing CCR as simpler or more commercial. These comparisons infuriated Fogerty, who viewed his music as more genuine than the band's studied approach to Americana. According to music industry insiders, the conflict exploded when Robertson received credit as the band's primary songwriter, while Fogerty felt his own contributions to American music were undervalued. Studio musicians describe Fogerty's obsession with proving his superior understanding of traditional American sounds, leading to increasingly authentic production choices that emphasized rawness over sophistication. The rivalry intensified when the band's Music from Big Pink received critical acclaim that Fogerty believed his work deserved. Record label executives witnessed his bitter response to their media coverage, where he accused Robertson of intellectual pretension and suggested the band was too concerned with impressing critics instead of serving the music. Concert footage shows visible tension when both acts appeared at music festivals, with Fogerty making pointed comments about real versus studied approaches to roots music. His criticism became increasingly personal, suggesting Robertson was more interested in being seen as an important artist than in making important music. Number 2, Saul Zaentz. Saul Zaentz wasn't a musician, but his role as CCR's record label owner made him John Fogerty's most hated adversary. Their legal battle over publishing rights and creative control consumed decades of Fogerty's life, transforming a business relationship into personal warfare that nearly ended his musical career entirely. The conflict began when Zaentz's Fantasy Records gained control of CCR's publishing rights through what Fogerty considered deceptive contracts. Music industry lawyers described the increasingly bitter legal battles as Fogerty fought to regain control of his own songs, while Zaentz's camp defended their contractual rights. The financial stakes were enormous, involving millions in royalties from CCR's classic catalog. According to court documents, Fogerty's hatred for Zaentz became consuming and personal. He accused the label owner of stealing my life's work and profiting from my creativity while preventing me from performing my own songs. Legal observers witnessed Fogerty's transformation from frustrated artist to obsessed litigant, spending years in courtrooms instead of recording studios. The warfare escalated when Zaentz sued Fogerty for allegedly plagiarizing his own earlier work in solo material. This legal paradox, being sued for sounding like himself, drove Fogerty to near insanity with rage. Entertainment lawyers describe his depositions as explosive rants, where he accused Zaentz of trying to own my musical DNA. Music industry veterans witnessed the toll this battle took on Fogerty's creativity and mental health. The constant legal pressure and financial drain prevented him from recording for years, while his obsession with defeating Zaentz consumed his energy and passion for music. 1. His own bandmates, CCR. The most shocking revelation is that John Fogerty's deepest hatred wasn't reserved for outside rivals. It was directed at his own Creedence Clearwater Revival bandmates, Tom Fogerty, Stu Cook, and Doug Clifford. What started as a family band became a nightmare of creative control battles, financial disputes, and personal betrayals that destroyed lifelong relationships and haunted Fogerty for decades. The conflict centered on Fogerty's role as CCR's creative dictator versus his bandmates' desire for equal input and recognition. Studio engineers describe increasingly tense recording sessions where Fogerty insisted on controlling every musical decision, while his bandmates demanded more creative freedom. Tom Fogerty, John's own brother, led the rebellion against what the others saw as tyrannical leadership. According to band insiders, the breaking point came when the other members allied against John's creative control, demanding equal songwriting credits and decision-making power. Fogerty's response was absolute rejection, telling them they weren't talented enough to contribute meaningfully to CCR's success. This brutal dismissal of his closest collaborators revealed the depth of his ego and perfectionist obsession. The betrayal deepened when his bandmates sided with Fantasy Records in legal disputes, effectively joining forces with the very label that Fogerty was fighting for his creative freedom. Music industry lawyers describe his shock and rage at discovering his own brother and childhood friends had become his legal adversaries. Concert promoters witnessed the toxic atmosphere during CCR's final tours, with band members barely speaking and Fogerty treating his longtime friends like hired musicians. The psychological toll was devastating. These weren't just business partners, but family members and lifelong friends who had shared his journey from garage band to superstardom. John Fogerty's feuds revealed a perfectionist consumed by authenticity battles and control issues. His hatred shaped rock history's greatest swamp rock classics. Which rivalry shocked you most? Like, comment, and subscribe for more music industry secrets.